Today we'll write equations in slope-intercept for representations of real-world applications. We're going to analyze the graph and write the equation, and we'll see what information is needed. So for instance, the first example is showing a graph, and the title is Snail Crawling. So if a snail is crawling for 8 minutes, 10 minutes at the constant rate, or if the distance is on the y-axis in inches. So the time in minutes is on the x-axis. The distance of the snail going slowly is on the y-axis. So the graph shows the relationship between the distance the snail is crawling and the time that it crawls. So for the beginning, what we want to see is the relationship and use points from the graph to make a table of values. So the time is on the x-axis and the distance is on the y-axis. For instance, let's see the point locations that we can read here. In 1 minute, the snail crawled 10 inches. In 2 minutes, the snail crawled 20 inches. In 3 minutes, he's at 30 inches. 4 minutes, 40. 5 minutes, 50. So again, assuming that the snail just kind of keeps crawling at a constant speed. So the distance is increasing by 10 inches per minute. At 0, it's 0. So we start in the origin, and then every minute the snail is crawling 10 inches. So that's a set of points that I chose from the graph. Now, to write the equation for this relationship, we need to see what is the slope of this relationship. So the slope is the ratio of how much is the vertical growth per horizontal. How much is the y difference over x difference? Y over x. So it's 10 inches per minute. 10 more inches, another minute. 10 more inches, another minute. 10 more inches, another minute. So your growth or the slope is 10 per 1. That multiplies by the number of minutes, and we start at 0. That same equation can be just y equals 10x. Where y is the distance, so the y variable represents the distance, because we need to tell what each variable represents. So y is the distance and x is the time. In the slope, the relationship is y over x, in other words, the distance traveled over time. To calculate the distance, y, we multiply 10 times x. So that is 10 slope times the number of minutes. So the distance will be, let's check if that works. The distance will be 50 if it's 10 times 5. So the y will be 50 inches if we multiply 10, which is the slope, times the number of minutes. 50 equals 10 times 5, which is 50. So the y is the distance, x is the time. We answered everything. We wrote the equation for the relationship, y equals 10x. And then tell what each variable represents. The y is the distance, the x is the time. How long does it take the snail to crawl 85 inches? So this is what we need to use now. 85 inches is the distance. So in our equation, y equals 10x, we substitute 85 inches. That would be distance, which is y. So we substitute 85 instead of y, which equals 10x. So if we divide by 10, it will take x time 8.5 minutes. 85 divided by 10, 8.5. So it will take 8.5 minutes to crawl 85 inches. So if that was an extension of the graph going up, and we would look at 85. So if I was to extend here 60, 70, 85, and the graph extended, we would read 8.5 here on that extension. Following the same slope, if we were to extend it outside of the notebook, we would see it on the line. So in order to calculate any time knowing the number of inches, we use the equation. So when we write the equation, we can use the equation to find where the snail would be, let's say, in 9 minutes, or where the snail would be in 12 minutes. Or we can calculate the distance if we substitute the time. So for this particular problem, we had to figure out how long does it take the snail to crawl 85 inches. So we substitute 85 instead of y because that's our distance, and then solve for x, which is for the time. How long will it take? 8.5 minutes. In the next graph, I have a relationship of time and distance of the, let's see what it says here. The graph shows the relationship between the amount of time that a backpacker hikes and the distance traveled. So instead of a snail here, we have a backpacker, we have a person. In 5 hours, this person hiked 7, let's see the graph here, 6. So if I look carefully at the scale, between 4 and 8 is 4 units, and half of that right there should be 6. So in 5 hours, we traveled 6 miles. Then in 10, we have 12. Then in 15, we have right between 16 and 20, 18. So we look carefully at the graph, and when we read the information, pay attention to the scales, because those scales sometimes are not consistent. In other words, they don't go by the same count. So the x-axis, which is the time, we have the number of hours going by 5. And then on the y-axis, which is the distance, we have the number of miles going up by 4. So in between here will be 2, 6, 10. So carefully analyze the graph and look at the scales that are given. So what does the 0.56 represent? The 0.56 is x for time. In other words, in 5 hours, the backpacker traveled the 6, which is the number of miles. So the 0.56 represents in 5 hours, the backpacker hiked 6 miles. Okay, so for every 5 hours, the backpacker will hike 6 miles, assuming that he's hiking or she at the consistent rate. That is the slope. The slope is the distance over time. So for 6 miles over 5 hours, the slope is the ratio of vertical to horizontal distance. So in the equation, when we write the equation, we need to have y equals slope. So the slope for every 6 miles, there are 5 hours. 6 more hours will be 12, 5 more hours will be 10. 6 more hours will be 18, 5 more hours will be 15. So the distance is calculated based on the slope, 6 over 5. So again, 6 miles per 5 hours, the ratio of mile over time multiplied by the x. So your equation without the units will equal y equals 6/5 x. The graph grows through 0, so plus 0 or not. Let's look at the different graphs showing a map of Iowa. The distance in inches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's say that is a map. On the map, we have the distance given in inches, where y-axis represents the actual distance. Actual distance in miles on the y-axis. So what does the slope represent? The representation of the slope is the actual distance in miles over distance in inches. So the slope is the ratio of distance in miles or actual distance to the distance in inches on the map. So when we're asked the question, what does the slope represent? That is the meaning of what is the y difference over x difference. So it is the ratio of actual distance to distance in inches on the map. That ratio will be, by looking at the graph carefully, we have the increase in miles, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So we need to analyze the graph. So for every inch, we have 30 miles. So it will be 30 miles per inch. So that is 30 miles per 1 inch. That is the slope. Miles per inch, how many miles per every inch? 30 for 1. If I go 30 more, that would be 60 over 2. If I go 30 more, that would be 90 over 3. So the slope is the ratio of actual distance, 2 inches on the map, and that is 30 miles per 1 inch. For every 30 miles, that is 1 inch on the map. To write the equation in slope-intercept form, we need that slope, 30 miles, not minutes, miles per 1 inch, multiplied by x, or we can say that this is y equals 30x, where y is the number of miles, and that would be calculated by multiplying 30 times the number of inches. Let's see another relationship. We have a word problem that is telling us that Simone paid $12 for an initial year subscription to a magazine. So if I want to subscribe to a magazine, I pay initial fee, and that is one-time payment. So $12 for the subscription. Then if I want to renew, I get a lower rate. So the renewal rate is $8 per year. So the renewal rate is 8 per year. That is your slope. Every year you would pay $8. And if you want to renew again, that will be 8, and again that will be 8, and again that will be 8. So you pay one time $12 for subscription, and then renewal rate $8 per year. This situation can be represented by the equation y equals 8x plus 12. So we have in the equation y equals, in other words, the cost will equal or be calculated based on the equation. 8x is 8 multiplied times the number of years, plus 12. 12 is the constant, that is your initial subscription. So I have 12 paid only one time, then 8 times 1, that will be after the first year, 8 times 2 after the second year, 8 times 3 after the third year, 8 times 4 after the fourth year. So the rate will stay 8 after. X represents the number of years, so times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4. The subscription is renewed, and the Y is the total cost. So the cost Y is calculated based on the initial fee of 12 plus 8x, 8 times each year that you renew it. So let's make a table of values and graph this situation. So on the x-axis, I'm going to have the number of years. So when I first start, it will be 0. First year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. So number of years. On the y-axis, so here we have x represents the number of years. On the y-axis, we need to have the total cost. So when I label my y-axis, I say total cost. X, number of years, Y, total cost. So let's say first year, that is my year 0, I pay $12. I pay that initial fee. I pay for the first time I am using that particular subscription. So I have my scale going up 4, 8, so I have increments by 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8. So in the middle, there'll be 4. So I have, by looking at my increase of years, 0, 12, initial fee. Okay. Then, after first year, my subscription is going to drop and is going to be 8 more dollars. So the total cost will be 12 plus 8, which is 20. So when I put it on the graph, I need to add 8 per year. So that is ordered pair is going to be 20 over 1 year. So that is my ordered pair, 120. Next year, I decide I want to subscribe again. So that will be 28. So after 2 years, my total cost will be 28. Then I go, okay, I want it again. 28 plus 8, 36. So third year. Then I go, why not? I want it again. So 36 plus 8. And then we put it on the graph for the fourth year. And complete the table of values. So by paying a consistent rate, which is the slope, $8 per year, we are looking at linear growth. Okay, so every year for the total cost, we're using the equation 8 multiplied by the number of years plus 12 initial value. So what does the slope represent in this situation? The slope is the ratio of y is the cost per year. So our slope in the equation is $8 for 1 year. The y-intercept in the equation is the initial value. So what is the y-intercept? The initial value. Initial value, b is 12. Using those two in the equation, we have in the equation y, total cost calculated by slope 8 over 1 multiplied by x plus 12, or y equals 8x plus 12, which was actually given to us in the problem itself. So in this equation, y, the total cost, is calculated based on slope times x plus y-intercept.